Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Pulse. I am your host, Connor Sundet, and on behalf of myself and the team here at Spokane Talks, we are very happy to have you with us. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be right back after this.
Well, this is Bloomsday in Spokane. We got about 40 firefighters and their friends and family handing out 40,000 cups of water as the day goes by.
It's a very good opportunity to see the public and support them and help them out and cheer them on during Bloomsday.
It's one of the best things about Spokane is that we have these major events and the whole community comes together not just to participate but to volunteer and show that they really care about our city and making our city look great.
This type of an event really is emblematic of Spokane because so many people get involved. We have 50,000 people probably running this race. Always has been a very huge event.
Right now we're at the corner of Broadway and Nettleton. It's the last water station before the finish, so people are pretty much dehydrated by the time they get to us. They really need our water.
The water stations are a vital part, especially on warm days like today. It's real important that we have the volunteers to help with that. Without the volunteers, Bloomsday wouldn't exist.
All up and down the course, there are people that are involved in this celebration. It really is a celebration of what Spokane's all about.
At Wendell, you are respected, you are valued, and we have an experience tailored to fit your lifestyle.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Gina.
And we bought 3 cars from Wendell Motors. Throughout the day, I just kind of would get updates, texts, phone calls, and I was actually really impressed with how my wife was taken care of.
People should shop at Wendell because they make you feel like family.
For your tailored experience, come see us at Wendell at the Y or Wendell.com.
What happens when you pay your ABC membership?
We're glad you asked.
We educate the future workforce.
We keep you safe.
Negotiate the best insurance rates.
Organize networking events.
Implement 401k programs.
To keep our members open shop.
Offer discounts to make you profitable.
Each path to success is different.
But they all start and go through ABC.
We are ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors of the Inland Pacific.
Where all the best builders and contractors locally unite.
When building a home or considering a major remodel, who are you going to choose? The Spokane Home Builders Association is an organization that works to elevate professionalism in the residential construction industry. We promote, protect, and educate for our community, building our community one home at a time. We are the Spokane Home Builders Association.
What's up, Spokane? I'm your host, Connor Sundet, here to keep you up to date on all things in our wonderful city. First, come down to the Spokane Comedy Club this weekend to watch Pauly Shore's stand-up routine and his unique Stick with the Dancing routine. Pauly Shore is an actor and comedian that travels around the country doing sets at top clubs in the nation. He has done shows as far east as Tampa Bay Improv and as far west as a Comedy Store in LA. Shore's special set, Stick with the Dancing, diverges a little bit from his normal routine. He talks more about his life and essentially being raised by comedians. Though more biographical, the show is sure to be hilarious. On January 15th at 2 p.m., there's a free Q&A to ask him about really anything. It could be comedy related, travel, or even just about his life. Even just being a fly on the wall could be really interesting, so come out and enjoy this special occasion. Next, we have a very special event coming up right here at Spokane Talks called Beyond Politics. Beyond Politics is an open forum where we are bringing both sides of the political spectrum together for a civil discussion. We will be streaming the event live on our YouTube channel, Facebook accounts, as well as KHQ's Facebook, starting at 5 p.m. on January 19th. The forum should run for about an hour and a half, and the idea is for people to learn to disagree agreeably instead of mudslinging each other all the time. We hope to see you there at 5 p.m. for this great discussion. And that's what's up, Spokane. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be right back.
Contact us today to learn how PowerView automation makes everyday living effortless. Why are housing prices going up so fast in the Spokane area? Hello, I'm Darren Watkins with the Spokane Association of Realtors. It's a simple case of supply and demand. Since 2010, we have seen the number of available homes on the market fall dramatically, from 2,348 in January of 2010 to only 164 per month in 2021. That's a 94% reduction in our housing supply. The result? Housing prices began to climb rapidly in 2015, with a median home price in Spokane County of $179,000. That same home today would cost you $380,000. That is, if you can even find a home to buy.
For the last, I'd say at least 10 to 15 years, I think we've been underbuilding. We've seen this crisis coming, and nothing's being done to fix it.
There are no homes to purchase. When there is a home that comes up that buyers like, you're up against 20 plus other buyers who are making an offer on the same house.
Adding to the crisis, thousands of families are fleeing major West Coast cities such as Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles. Among the top destinations, Spokane, Washington.
When you talk about an out-of-town buyer, they've sold that home in a coastal market, let's say, a Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, take your pick, for $1.5 million, and they come to Spokane and can replace that thing and be in a nicer home for $500,000.
When there are 20 plus offers on a property that they feel like they don't have a chance. So now they're having to look at homes far lower than they're even qualified for because they have to compete with cash deals or something that goes so much further over the list price, and it's extremely defeating for clients.
The answer is clear. We need more homes immediately, especially for entry-level workforce housing. Every day that we wait, those costs are just going to keep going up and up.
First, join us with Kent in a heartfelt goodbye to Mark Richards from Downtown Spokane Partnership. Enjoy.
Well, welcome to the Pulse of Spokane. Kent Adams here. I hope you're having a good time in our new year. And my guest today is probably here for his last time, and we'll tell you why. He's moving to sunny Florida, Tampa, Florida. We have Mark Richards with us today to talk about all things downtown Spokane. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't ask why the move.
Join our live stream on January 19th at 5 p.m. for a conversation with community leaders pushing beyond politics. Often we agree on the problems, but critical to crafting good policy is honestly airing differences of opinion and experience. That's the goal, an honest exchange between the Red Squad and the Blue Squad, remembering we're all on the same team. Go Team USA!
Well, welcome, as I said, to the Pulse of Spokane. Mark Richard, short timer, aren't you? What is this? What is this that's going on? You've been for, what, 9 or 10 years, the CEO of Downtown Spokane Partnership and all that's been involved in the years. It's been a good run. A lot of good things have happened under your leadership and so forth. Been a little strained this last year for all of us being downtown and just running a business and so forth. But you got an opportunity. What's happening?
Yeah. Well, I did, Kent, and it's it just seemed like the timing. There's kind of as you say, the stars kind of aligned. I've been working on this stadium project and working very closely with a number of different stakeholders. One of those being the United Soccer League, and they contacted me through the holidays.
They saw some talent there.
They did. I was I feel very fortunate that they liked what they saw in the way that I worked with people, the way that I was able to bring people together, and and do it in a way that is constructive and productive and really accomplish what we did in terms of the school district ultimately deciding to move the stadium downtown. And so they've offered me a position I cannot refuse. And as I think we talked, it takes me, gets me a little ahead of the schedule. My wife and I have been talking about moving to a warmer climate for retirement. And this just seems like a fantastic soft landing in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah. Well, before the Downtown Spokane partnership, it was the county commissioner, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what it was before.
Well, before that, so before that, I ran the government affairs program for the realtors and home builders.
Okay.
For about 5 or so years, and then prior to that, I sold real estate. Yeah.
Can't keep a job, huh?
No, I do. I tend to hop around. Yeah.
Good for you. When I retired, you can see how successful I am in retirement. But when I did retire about 7 or 8 years ago, my wife asked me if I enjoyed what I had done through life, and my answer was yes. And I thought, that I tell people that because it's important that we be challenged. Number one, you're going to be challenged with a new situation,
yes,
always, and that you've had a couple of great opportunities here in Spokane to service in government and service in semi-government, if you will, in the politics of downtown and so forth. And so, best of luck to you. Moving to Tampa, they have a football team of some sort down there.
They do, yeah. And so I'm kind of excited about that. And just the idea of having, because I do love football, I love sports, and then just getting the chance to work in the area of soccer and sports in general, just so positive and exciting. And about 100 years ago, I played soccer. I love telling this story just real quickly. When I was so my senior year, I went to Ferris High School, born and raised here in Spokane, and we won the city championship before it became a letter sport. The year before it became a letter sport.
Of course, great timing.
So it meant absolutely nothing. It's recorded nowhere in history, but right here.
It is now.
It is now, that's right. Yeah, and on this show.
Yes.
So it's just really kind of special to be able to return to that. Never thought I would be working in the sport of soccer, but really I'll be working to all that real estate experience and then facilitating, bringing people together.
I get a kick out of sometimes when I ask young people, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And the fact is, my counsel to them is be open to possibilities.
Yeah.
Because what we think we want when we're 17, 18, 19, or even the first couple of years of college, and what we end up doing later in life can be so different. And it's that,
especially if you're open, right?
Yes,
I mean, if you're closed and fixed, then sometimes we don't feel or see when that opportunity comes that really connects with us.
Yes.
Yeah, no, good advice.
Last time you were here, we talked about the holidays and the Christmas and New Year's coming up and fireworks and you name it and so forth. I got to ask, how did it all go?
Yeah, we, downtown was just so beautiful. We had such great comments and feedback on just the lights and the displays and the events that took place. I think the retail sector of downtown did pretty well, considering we're in the middle or the tail end of this pandemic, maybe heading into this next phase. So all in all, I think it was a very great season. People were happy, they were engaged, they enjoyed their downtown. We definitely are not back to normal. And one of the biggest things there, of course, is just, missing so many of our employees.
Yes.
So the people that normally would have dined or shopped after work, gone out.
Or gone on their lunch break or whatever.
Yeah. Many of those are unfortunately working from home. So we just continue to share this message, whether it's the holidays or not. The holidays were good and they were strong.
Right.
But as citizens, we just have to be conscious about getting out of our pajamas, getting in the car, and supporting our local retail.
Right.
If we want those shops and that dining experience around when all this dust clears.
I'm not going to ask for names and numbers, but are we still continuing to see growth in terms of new businesses downtown?
We absolutely are, which has just been so, I would say humbling, but it's just been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Is just even
of all times.
Yeah, in 2020, we saw a net growth in businesses. 2021, another net growth in business. And we've got a couple that are in process of their, kind of finishing their final details that will open soon. And so that's been just, I guess, I just feel it charges my team and makes them we understand the magnitude of what we're doing, and it just makes us so committed to trying to do everything we can to make downtown special and to attract customers, because we still have entrepreneurs in Spokane putting out their life savings, absolutely,
no kidding,
on the line in our beautiful downtown. We need to do everything we can to support them, and that includes all of you at home.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Coming up on January 19th, a week from almost today, we're going to be doing a Beyond Politics program. In fact, you're hoping to be able to be participating in that with community leaders, both elected and business and so forth. We're going to talk about two things live from the Catalyst building that night. We're going to talk about two things. One is, how do we bridge this divide in our community, as it is in so many communities and across the country, of speaking at people instead of speaking with people, you know? And so we're going to spend the first hour, Sulani Madsen and Jim Wavida are our co-hosts, so we have left and right.
Good.
So do we in terms of people coming. It's not all one side or the other. It's an even group. And we were asking them, let's show by example, because it's going to be live streamed, how we can work on it. So the first hour we'll do that. The second hour is going to be the issue I want to talk to you about for a minute or two, and that's the homeless issue. And so much of it focuses on downtown. When I think of homeless, I think of all the pictures you see and everything else. It's more than downtown. We clearly understand that. But there is a big focus, and that's where you can see it with the sleeping on the streets and other things. How are we doing?
Well, you know, in light of everything that's going on in the world, right, and in light of, frankly, some dramatic shift in terms of legislation that was passed last year with regards to the use of drugs, making it essentially subject to 2 warnings and then a misdemeanor for possession of things like fentanyl.
Not even a slap on the wrist.
Right, for fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine. So in light of all of those things, I think we're doing really well, frankly. We believe, as an organization, we believe that we can be doing better today. There's some discussion about, well, we need more shelter. Yes, we probably do. But we need a right type of shelter. Again, it's been our longstanding position that that shelter and services needs to come attached with expectations and accountability. If we just give and handouts, what we saw over at the convention center, the public's about to hear this as the mayor will give her report. What we saw was, sadly, many people that are suffering from addiction and mental illness who just were destructive, destroyed the bathrooms, destroyed the property, literally used the carpet as their urinal. And then they put up public, porta potties, and they begin to destroy those, right? And so why does that happen? It's our belief that if you don't have accountability and expectation, you get a level of behavior that's unruly or more unruly.
Right.
The other piece of this is that we have been advocating, and surprisingly, the business organization is one of the few voices, frankly, that where we are advocating that we need to not only have empathy with that expectation accountability, that includes we need to have more mental health treatment, and we need to have drug and addiction recovery treatment, and yet that is not on our council's agenda. It's not on the state legislator's agenda. I don't know that it's even on our federal agenda. We need to be addressing those root causes, Kent, if we have any hope as a country and if we have any hope as a community.
Otherwise, this will continue.
It absolutely will.
I mean, it really will.
Yeah. And people say, well, this isn't just drugs. It isn't just mental illness. You're absolutely right. People are homeless for a variety of reasons. However, the small percentage of individuals that are, what I would say, not to be insensitive, but wreaking havoc, that don't know where they are, they cannot behave because they're out of their minds, literally.
Right.
We need to intercede. We need to offer, and then if they are unwilling, frankly, it's our belief that we need to have the laws in place to take them off of our street and show them that we care so much about them that we're going to get them into treatment as many times as it takes. Rather than this notion that we're just going to wait around until they're ready for help. When you're on fentanyl, when you're on heroin, you don't know you need help. And sadly, what we're seeing is just this playing out as many people just slowly dying on our street.
And I'm worried that the first wife of somebody or the first child of somebody gets accosted downtown or anywhere with some of these people, because again, most of them don't know that they're a problem.
Exactly.
I mean, we really... If we care about all of this, we care about the individual too, and we got to help them.
Right.
Yeah. I don't understand the state and even some of the local politicians why they turned their back on this. I really don't.
Well, I think it's conflated, right? I think there's this perception by some that it's a housing issue. That what we've been dealing with was happening long before the COVID housing crisis. And so we would vehemently disagree. We think that the folks, again, the 5% or so that are breaking the laws, that they are they're engaging in these behaviors that we as a society used to call unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
What we're finding is the vast majority of those are suffering from mental illness and addiction. Mm-hmm. So we believe we should start there, because let's face it, the mom with 2 kids who's left domestic violence, the person who lost their job because of COVID, the vast majority of those individuals are getting help.
Yes. Good.
They are getting shelter. They are getting back to work. They're getting back on their feet because they want to be, because they know they've got a problem and they're doing what they need to do to fix it.
And we've got some great organizations helping, Union Gospel Mission and others. Yes.
Right. So if for our community's sake, for these people's sake, we need to hone in on those 2 key things.
Okay. Well, on my parting goodbye to you, sir. You're here working from Spokane for a couple months, and then you move, right?
Right.
So,
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to miss you. We've had a lot of fun over the years, for sure. I would.
Who am I going to give a bad time to?
Call you friend. I don't know. You're going to have to find some new folks. You never know. Maybe we'll touch base. I will be coming back to Spokane from time to time because we've got this wonderful men's professional team and women's semi-professional team that the USL will be putting together in Spokane.
Yeah. That's kind of exciting.
Maybe we could talk about that in 6 months or a year from now.
Absolutely.
I would love
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, for all you've done for our community over the years, from working with the Sheba and SAR and the county and downtown Spokane partnership, and now you're going to take your wares across the country because you'll be helping organizations get started, right?
Yes, throughout the country, which is so amazing to me to be able to take and do what we did here and to explore these opportunities for young adults in other communities. But I just have to say this again. First of all, thank you for this opportunity you provided me and our organization. I truly am grateful for the Downtown Spokane Partnership, and I believe they're on solid footing.
Yes.
And nothing but the best for them. But this is I'm born and raised here in Spokane.
Yeah, I know this is hard.
It is.
I was wondering.
Yeah. Very difficult. But we're also excited about this new, this new chapter and what possibilities lay ahead. Yeah. Especially because they include Spokane, and I will find the ability to come back. I've got a lot of family here. Yeah. Lots and lots of great friends.
Right.
You won't get rid of me forever.
You better not show up and I hear about it afterwards and you haven't called.
Fair enough.
Okay, you're in trouble then.
All right.
Mark, thank you. Bless you and your family on the move. That's always fun to find a house and everything else that goes with that. I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for watching the Pulse of Spokane, everybody. Have a great day.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
I was selling drugs. I was in and out of prisons. I didn't know how to read or write. I couldn't even read the sign at UGM that said, "Hope starts here." Union Gospel Mission taught me to trust people. I have a job. I'm learning to read. I never thought that I would find a community that would support me like UGM does. I am so grateful to God. Real change is possible. Union Gospel Mission.
Starting a digging project? Before you reach for the shovel, you must click callbeforeyoudig.org, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. Protect our buried utilities and click callbeforeyoudig.org.
Spokane Realtors are dedicated to helping you find the right place to live. We're more than 2,000 strong, small business men and women guiding you through this most important purchase. We're also your neighbors, giving back thousands in volunteer hours to make our community a better place. We believe owning a home helps you live longer, with stronger families and better neighborhoods. That's who we are, ready to help you find your way home. Call one today.
Next, enjoying conversation about homelessness and police reform between myself and the president of the Spokane City Council, Brian Beggs. Take a look. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this edition of The Pulse. Thank you for tuning in to Spokane Talks. I am, of course, your host, Connor Sundet, excited to be here with you today. And today we have a bit of an exciting guest. The Spokane president of the City Council, Brian Beggs, is here, so I'd like to welcome you for this special edition. Thank you for coming in and sitting with us.
Hey, it's so great to be here.
Thank you. All right, so we'll just jump right into it. Just homelessness and law enforcement, but I think we'll go with homelessness first. So my first question for you, how can the city, or the council and city administration better collaborate on addressing homelessness?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is to figure out what our roles are. So the city council's role is to set homelessness policy and then to fund it. So that's what we do. So we set years ago a policy of housing first, and that's based on the science and the data out there, which says that the number one cure for homelessness is housing. So you get people sheltered, and then they're not causing problems downtown. There's less crime, there's less health issues. It's cheaper to house people than to deal with police and fire and emergency medical. So we have a housing first policy in Spokane, like a lot of cities, including Boise, which a lot of people compare us to Boise.
Right.
The difference between Spokane and Boise is Spokane is way poorer per capita than Boise. Boise has a lot more money and a lot less poverty. So we set housing first, which means you get people off the street into low barrier housing, and then you give them services. And if they need behavioral health or they need substance abuse treatment or whatever, you get them into that, and then you get them into transitional housing, and then hopefully you get them into permanent housing. So that's the policy that we have. And then we have a policy that says, figure out how many homeless people there are that are unsheltered, and then purchase contracts so that you are sheltered those people. And then, of course, it's our job to come up with the money to do it. That's what we do. The mayor and administration's job is to find those locations and to find those providers and enter into contracts with them. And that's where we've been a little bit sideways lately, is that I think council, and not that I can speak for every council member, but in general, has been frustrated that the administration has not been identifying locations where we could have homeless shelters and then presenting us with contracts that we could fund to get off the street. Because really, we hear from two groups of people. We hear from a group of people who are advocates, kind of human rights advocates for homeless people, who are saying, hey, people are dying, they're suffering, get them housing and human dignity. And then we hear from property owners and business people who said, hey, you're not taking care of these people, and they're in our doorways, they're using our alleys and sidewalks as bathrooms, our customers are a little afraid of people who look a little bedraggled, so, get these people into services. So we're hearing it really from both sides of the political spectrum, and they all want the same thing: find housing for these people. And so, and City Council is like, yeah, that's what we should be doing, and we've funded everything we've been asked to fund. And I didn't listen to the mayor's press conference today because I was testifying at the legislature, but I think they're saying, hey, it's difficult to find the exact right spot. They're working on it, and we're just hoping they work on it more effectively.
Great. So it sounds like defining roles for for both the city council and the administration, that's kind of a balancing act that's been a little bit tough to deal with. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, sometimes the mayor in Spokane, and I'm not speaking just of Mayor Woodward, but the previous Mayor Condon, they confuse their role and think that they're setting policy. And then maybe they don't like housing first, and so they don't really want to do housing first. And it's like, no, City council, under our city charter and elected by the people in each of the 3 districts, we set the policy, they implement it. So I think when we get outside of our lane, and then sometimes in the past, I don't think recently, but city council members have gone to staff working for the mayor and say, hey, you need to do this or that. And it's like, yeah, you're not the boss of me. The mayor supervises the city staff, council sets policy. But when either one of us gets a little bit out of our lane, I think that is a challenge. But I will say with this particular mayor and council, we have been getting along pretty well overall, much better than with the previous administration and council. We meet regularly. I talk to the mayor every Monday morning. We have a good meeting and always a very civil conversation. And we all want what's best for the city. So for the most part, we're there. I think the only times we get a little sideways is who's in charge of setting policy. And that's just normal politics too. So that's fine.
Of course, that goes all the way up and all the way down.
Yep.
Defining roles is very important.
Yeah.
My next question for you is, if you were the mayor of Spokane, what would your plan be to address homelessness from that perspective?
Yeah, so my advice to any future mayor and this existing mayor is really the same, is find some locations. Recently we opened the convention center, which was great because we saved lives. I mean, people literally would have died. But because we didn't have a really good plan, we were cramming 300 people with lots of behavioral challenges into a spot. And that is just not particularly effective, good for the people, good for the convention center, good for the neighbors. So you need smaller spaces, probably no more than 100 people. And so you need to find buildings out there. And I was just talking to a media person on the way down here, and I said, we have a real estate broker who's been working for the city, who's identified several locations where the owners of the building are willing to rent to the city or sell to the city for homeless shelter space. And for some reason, the administration has rejected several of those sites. And I get why it's challenging, because at first glance, a lot of businesses and neighborhoods are like, don't put anything homeless near me. And the truth is that if you have a really good operator and a good building and location and it's set up right physically, you hardly know there's a homeless shelter there. And that's what we have to go for. But to say that we're not going to put homeless shelters near where anyone lives or where near any businesses are, there's just no space in the city. And if you want to ship people out into the country, that doesn't work, because these folks don't have transportation. They need to get to services for treatment and job training. And so it is challenging. It is hard and it is challenging. But eventually you have to take a site that's not perfect and make it better. And so that's what I just think you need to get the list of available properties, spread them out through the city so we kind of accept our share of it equally, and choose really good operators and raise the money to fund it. Because if we don't, that's what we get, the stuff that we see on the 6 o'clock news, and it ends up being more costly. It cost us supposedly about $400,000 for 2 weeks at the convention center. It shouldn't cost that much, but that's because we did it in an emergency. It wasn't planned out. We didn't have the contracts in place.
Right. So establishing contracts with a smaller space and multiple of those, that sounds like the direction that you would take.
That's what I think. And I don't know that the mayor would disagree with that. It's just that she and her team are in charge of saying yes or no to particular spaces. And I think probably I would have said yes to more spaces than she said yes to. That's just my supposition. She hasn't shared me her list, so I can't say. And one thing that would be helpful, I think, would be to see the list. It's a little problematic, because as soon as you say, all right, here's 20 potential locations, then the people in those areas immediately will be agitated. But that's fine. That's democracy.
Right.
And they're going to be agitated if they get picked anyway. So I'd rather hear about it up front. And I think if everyone sees, all right, here's the 10 spots that we're potentially looking at, they won't feel so picked upon. So if you just pick one spot of the 10 and you don't tell them about the other 9 and you just say, here's the spot, they feel like, hey, you're picking on us. Whereas if we can show them the 10 potential spots, I think they'll go, okay, well, we can see why this one ended up being the top pick.
Makes a little more sense. And more information is generally a better thing for any kind of discussion.
That is my experience, because if you don't provide the information, people make up the information, and usually they make it up worse than it actually is.
Of course, for sure. Who are the most important stakeholders to address homelessness, and what is the council doing to collaborate or convene on the homelessness challenges?
Yeah.
Bit of a loaded question there. So
yeah, no, that's fine. So, I mean, the traditional stakeholders are going to be, there is a whole network of social service agencies and groups that assist people who are houseless, getting into housing, getting jobs, getting back on their feet. So that's one group, and they have a monthly meeting called the Homeless Coalition, and there's, dozens and dozens of people from all different organizations that show up. So that's one group of stakeholders. Police, fire, and emergency medical, another one. They're dealing with people every day on the street. The big medical groups, so we've got Providence, Multicare, and Kaiser in town. They each have foundations.
Yes.
They have an interest, because if they're probably willing to fund some things, because it's cheaper for them to fund some things, preventative treatment up front, instead of emergency room care and overnight hospital stays down the road. You've got local business groups. So downtown where we are, you got the Downtown Spokane Partnership. They're definitely,
of course.
But if you can go to Garland District, you can go to East Sprague, and the Main Street block just west of Division. You've got the West End. So you've got those business groups that you got to be chatting with. The hotel, motel people are kind of, and Visit Spokane are their own group. And then you've got we have 29 neighborhood councils in Spokane that sort of cover the city. And, it's not that they perfectly represent their neighborhood, because, maybe it might be from 5 to a couple dozen that usually go to their meetings from a neighborhood of thousands of people. But still, they're interested. So you have to pull together all those people. And again, I just think you have to lay the options out. And the challenge is everybody just wants it to be better. Right. And so you just have to say, yeah, well, here's the thing. Here's the pros and cons for this strategy, for that strategy. And doing nothing is a strategy. It is a choice. That is not working. Everybody's clear on that. Yes. I've actually seen, of all those stakeholders that I've mentioned, they have come closer together in recent months and in the last year than I've ever seen them. So I am, as hard as the situation is, I am more hopeful, because I would say in the 4 or 5 years leading up to now, one of the challenges was that people were arguing about what the best way to deal with homelessness. Right. And to simplify it, this is way oversimplification, but there was kind of a Team Union Gospel Mission and a Team Catholic Charities. Mm-hmm. And Union Gospel Mission operates substance abuse treatment centers and shelters all in the same thing. And so if you're going to be in their system, you have to be totally clean, not using anything, and that's their thing, because they're doing treatment. And so if you're in treatment, you don't want the person sleeping next to you smelling like alcohol. That doesn't work. So they have a niche, but they would proclaim that anyone who needs shelter needs to be sober before they get shelter. And if I understand their philosophy, if you make their life difficult by not giving them shelter, then maybe they'll stop using. That's their thing. There's another group of people who have a different approach. It's the housing first approach, which says, no, if you want to get someone to stop drinking or using drugs, you give them housing, you give them medical care, you give them food, and then they will be stabilized enough to do the hard work to get over their substance abuse addiction. And the truth is, both philosophies work for different groups of people. The way I look at it is, yes, we need all of it.
Right.
But we spent several years where some people were arguing, don't give money to Union Gospel Mission, and several people were arguing, don't give money to Catholic Charities. And so when we were having that kind of fight among the stakeholders, we really couldn't get anywhere, because the only way we're really going to get there is everybody get on the same page and move together. And I see we're closer to that than we've ever been, not quite there. And what I'm hoping that City Council will do with the mayor and all these stakeholders is, pull together everyone, get a base plan, figure out how much it's going to cost, And it's going to cost a lot. I mean, that's the other challenge is
Sure.
I imagine that we're going to have to spend $3 to $5 million a year more than we're spending right now. And that's a big amount of money. It's not, we don't have it in our savings for the city. We don't have a revenue source for it. It's going to take private sector and foundations to help us. And then we're going to have to get some money from the state and the federal government, and then we're going to have to tighten our belts on other operations and devote more money to it. But I think if we do all of that and we solve the problem, then our city will be thriving and we'll grow into that budget expense. But that's what it's going to take, and it's just challenging. And there have been people who I think who are newer to the problem, including some people in the administration who are newer to the problem, who are just like, really, it can't cost that much money, or we can't, it's just, there's not that many homeless people really, or if we stop making housing available, maybe they'll just leave Spokane. There's a whole group of people who think that by offering shelter to people, that we're encouraging people to come to Spokane, which I can't imagine anyone in San Diego currently is, get on a bus and come to Spokane because it's so nice to be homeless in Spokane in the winter or the summer. In the summer, it's too hot and there's wildfire smoke. So I just think that is kind of an urban legend that people are coming to Spokane because we're so generous with people who are unsheltered, and it's just not the case.
Not really. Yeah, it's an interesting thing trying to balance between all the stakeholders, because there's a lot. You could really say that anybody is a stakeholder at some point, because we all live in this community, and I think everybody agrees that we want it to be better. Nobody's saying, yes, more homelessness. Not a single person is saying that. Hopefully, at least I haven't met one.
Yeah.
But it's oftentimes an approach thing. We don't agree on how to go forward with it. So moving as one in one direction, choosing one philosophy, that would be quite important moving forward.
And the thing is, and this is, I'll go back, I was happy to learn today that we both attended Whitworth. And one of the things that I learned there is that there's so many different beliefs in the world, period. And then even within the sort of evangelical Christian tradition, there's so many beliefs there.
Yeah.
And I really, I'm big on ecumenicalism, which is, all right, here's the deal. I don't have to get you to agree to 100% of my beliefs, but which ones do we have in common?
Sure.
What do we have in common? And let's focus on what we have in common and not our differences. And I think that's the approach to homelessness. And I think we're moving in that direction of when I talk to the downtown Spokane partnership, they have changed their language on this so much in the last 18 months. And so I'm hopeful that they get it, that we need shelter. One, there's a case out there you're maybe familiar with, Boise v. Martin, which says we can't enforce our no camping ordinances if we don't have enough shelter beds. So we just can't even enforce the law. And so that's why we have people sleeping under the railroad viaducts.
I can't force you to go anywhere.
We
else.
can't. And so whether you care about the person who's sleeping under the viaduct, or you care about just having the viaduct clear so people can walk through, whatever your top thing is, both roads lead to a shelter bed for that person. And so that's really what I focus on, is okay, our motivations might be different, our values might even be a little bit different, but if we can find that common ground and invest that money and then get us over the hump to that next spot. And frankly, as big a problem as it is in Spokane, it's so much less than Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA. It's actually solvable in Spokane from a scale of, okay, there's a few thousand people here. We don't know exactly how many homeless people there are, but I'm just going to estimate based on reports I've seen, 2,000 to 3,000 in the county who are just unsheltered homeless people. About 800 or 900 of them are in shelters. And then the rest are in cars or camping or doorways. And so, but that's doable. Like that, we could build spaces and fund spaces for that, especially if we work together with the county and city of Spokane Valley.
Right. Common ground, it seems like it's a valuable, almost commodity that we don't see often enough these days. So focusing on that and which directions we can move in together seems to be the key to at least negating homelessness as much as we can right now, and moving forward, doing more work for that. With the closure of the convention center, we talked about that a little bit earlier, as a warming shelter with serving up to 400 individuals in one night, What would be your plan for the transition so that these individuals aren't back on the street?
Well, so again, for the last several years, under 2 different mayors, we've passed resolutions that says, administration, please find locations for warming centers ahead of time when you can get them for cheaper. Find organizations you can get under contract to operate them so that when the temperature goes down, you're ready. And everybody knows where they are. So it's not a big crisis, because people who are unsheltered and houseless often don't, they don't have the internet. They don't know where there's a vacancy and things like that. So that's the ideal. Now, this last summer, we got really frustrated that still hadn't happened. So we passed an actual law that required the administration to come to us in September and say, here's the plan for the upcoming winter and the summer and the following winter and things. So every September, they're supposed to come with the plan. And they didn't really have it. It's not that they didn't have anybody working on it, because there were some people working on it, as I think I mentioned. Yes. Staffing was down. But anyway, so the solution was get the plan ahead of time. Now, they didn't, for whatever reason. They didn't really have the plan. But there were when, as the convention center was winding down, and we knew from the public facilities district that we couldn't stay there. It's it's not the city's building. I think some people don't understand. The convention center is not owned by the city. No. So we can only be there as long as they let us be there. But Catholic Charities offered the first floors at 3 different buildings that could have housed between 75 and 90 people. And their only request was, hey, you have to staff it. Like, use the guardians who you're using at the convention center, have them staff it, and sign a contract that you'll pay for any damage, and if we have to use more utilities or whatever they do. So essentially the solution probably would have been, from where I sit, from what I know, and I'm not 100% in the loop with the administration, but is to piecemeal it. So again, instead of trying to find one central location for 300 or so people, find as many small locations, work with churches and anyone else that can take even 15 to 20 at a time. Yes. People. I think that would have been, and again, we had a commitment for 75 to 90. So that would have been a chunk. I know they were able to get, I want to say I saw an email that said they had like 36 to 45 of the people in the convention center. They were able to actually find spaces in the existing shelter systems. So if you add those to the 90, you're almost how many people were there that night. So there were 154 people there the last night. So if you just look at it, hey, we're just going to take bites of the elephant until we get down to 154 spots in the short term while we continue to look for another site. That would have been my approach. Maybe the administration took that approach. I don't know, but what I heard from Catholic Charities is that they weren't taken up on their offer for that space.
Okay. So it sounds like you have taken up on that offer and pieced it together a little bit instead of trying to make it in this one big area to several smaller areas.
Yeah. And that's, as I sit here today, and again, it's several days later, and I wasn't, it wasn't my job, and I wasn't facing all the operational issues. So I try not to be on a high horse about it, but that's what my brain tells me would have been the best approach.
Do you feel the point in time count is an accurate reflection in the current homelessness population?
No. The point in time count is required by the federal government if you receive funding to do it, and there's nothing wrong with the point in time count. I mean, it's a good thing, but it's only a one-time thing, and it's only as good as where you counted. So last year, they didn't count anyone who wasn't in a homeless shelter. So they only counted people in the homeless shelter. So the point in time count somehow equated with how many shelter beds we had funded. That was the point in time count. So that's not particularly helpful. Technically, we complied with the rule. We had a COVID dispensation on it. But the good news is the city has a homelessness information system. And anyone who gets city money to serve homeless people, whether it's shelters, whether it's outreach, whatever it is, they're required to put into the city's database individuals by name of who they've served. And and in it is this person homeless or not? So whether or not they're in a shelter or not, if they're getting services, if they're getting food, the city has a pretty good sense of how many people are accessing services within the city. And so one of the laws that we passed last year was requiring the mayor to release that information every quarter. And again, the administration has not been releasing it. So we don't really know, but that's the kind of information to be helpful. I did get a report from the Washington State Department of Commerce from 2020 numbers, not 2021, and they had some way of counting similar to the city's computer information system. They were estimating there were 3,000 to 5,000 homeless people, and only of which 800 or 900 were sheltered. So, and when I say homeless, I mean unsheltered homeless people. There's a whole nother category of people who are, sleeping on couches, 2 families in a house that's built for one house. I'm not counting that. If you start counting those numbers, you're in the tens of thousands of people who are fit that definition. So one of the things that I think is really important is let's get the number. Because if we know what the number is, even if it's overwhelming and we don't have the money to really serve it, we at least know. And again, I just think there's that, saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I just think that really applies here. It's like, okay, well, get our best number we can, get as many shelter beds as we can figure out, and get any other strategies that we can. There's another strategy is letting people camp on open land and have cars there. And there's a group, Jules Helping Hands, they kind of have a camp out at 2nd and Freya right now. And they just requested to the city, hey, city, we'll staff it. You don't have to pay us to staff it. But can you pay for porta potties and dumpsters? Which will, of course, also alleviate a lot of public health issues. And to my knowledge, so far, the city administration hasn't been willing to do that. They certainly haven't come to council. But it's just like, well, again, camping outside in this kind of weather is not ideal either. But better than not a tent, better together with 70 or so people who can kind of watch out for each other than people individually being out there and being vulnerable. So my sense is that there's different solutions for different groups. And frankly, there's certain people with a mental health issue that they can't be on the floor of a convention center on a mat with 200 other people. They literally, their brain will not let them do that. And they need a tent or more space or sleeping in their car. And again, in our much better world, they would have a small individual room and privacy of that almost all of us would expect if we were sleeping somewhere and not sleeping on a floor with strangers. But whatever works is my feeling. And I just think we need to, right now we have a law in the books that allows us to do camping. But we haven't had a real camp other than this current one for a long time.
What is your recommendation to better track the trends of homelessness?
Well, again, I just think that if the city shares and posts on its website every quarter, here's what our database says. And again, people can say, well, that database is not perfect. It's not. But what's great about it, I loved how you used the word trend, is, okay, it's not perfect, but it's a trend. So is it going up or is it going down? It doesn't matter whether it's 1,567 or 1,493. That doesn't really matter, but kind of generally where it is, and is it getting higher, or is it getting lower? Most people think it's getting higher, and that's because the affordability of housing is getting tough in this. Rents have, I can't remember the exact numbers, but they've gone up like 35% to 50% in the last couple of years. And again, I'm not remembering it, but the realtors have a little formula that says for every $100 a month more, whether it's a mortgage or a rent, you've displaced X amount of families. And I don't know what it is, but we've certainly done that in Spokane. Spokane used to be one of the most affordable places to find housing in the state. It just was. It is not anymore. It's not the worst, but it's not. And the problem is that wages haven't gone up. So housing is way higher. Wages, might be up a little bit. And there's some new kind of cool jobs coming in. But people who are sort of lifers in Spokane don't have access to those jobs. So my suspicion is that it's going up just because people are being priced out of housing.
Well, we talked about homelessness quite a bit. I think it's time enough to pivot over to law enforcement. So how active were you with advocating for the substantial law enforcement reform that passed in the 2021 legislative process?
Yeah, I was very involved in that conversation, and I have been involved with law enforcement reform for a good 20 years or so. As you might know, I'm a lawyer, and I have dealt with a lot of those issues. I've represented law enforcement people, individual law enforcement members who have challenges, and I've represented people who have complained against law enforcement. I had a big case quite a while ago, but the AutoZem case, who was killed on camera, kind of similar to the George Floyd, like he should never have been killed, didn't do anything wrong, but anyway, he was killed. And that led to a lot of changes in Spokane, a lot of really good things. Our department really stepped up. We invited the Department of Justice in to review everything and then I think they made 42 recommendations. And I want to say our department fulfilled 40 of them. Unfortunately, by the time they filled those, there was a new president, and his Department of Justice didn't want to certify what we had done, so we didn't get the gold star. So I came on council in 2016, which means since then I have not been suing Spokane police people, and I've really been working on supporting officers to get where they need to go, and the work that I was doing before, which was how do we improve the relationship between individual officers and the community, because that seemed to be really broken. Back when I started the AutoZem case back in 2006, if you can believe that, it got, the approval rating for the police was under 50%. And then all the reforms that we did and all the community engagement the department did, that approval rating went up over 80%. And then, national conversation with George Floyd and other things, I think probably it went down some. Although the demonstrations in Spokane, the very first one, the police, in my judgment, did a really good job for most of it. The demonstrators were doing a good job. And then things went kind of sideways at the end of it. And, people will point their fingers at who and why and whatever. But a part of it was the police they have kind of something they call the Bearcat, which is like a tank, and they put people in riot gear and tear gas and things like that. And so my feedback to the chief afterwards was, I think if you use a little bit less force and appearance of force, it'll go better. And sure enough, the next week at the next demonstration, they took the police out of the riot gear. They put them on bicycles in the parades with the people. The demonstrators cheered the police, thing. It really changed it. And I really commend our department and their leadership. And so all the further demonstrations, there were no more violence, no more problems. And that was good. But to get to your thing about what happened in the legislature last year. So as a result of the George Floyd conversation, I put together a list of about 25 things that I thought would improve policing in Spokane and improve the relationship between the community and police officers so they could work together for real public safety. So I kind of put that list together and shared it with council and shared it with the mayor. And the mayor agreed, to her credit, to convene a community conversation I'm going to call it a pilot conversation. So it's not at a big public meeting where people are at microphones. We invited, I think under 20 people, but police officers and community group representatives, just into a room with facilitators. It's not secret, but it's private. It wasn't on TV or anything like that. And so we've been having conversations to try to understand. So for police to understand community groups and community groups to understand police, I think it's gone really well. So we've done that, but along the way, not because I caused it or anything, but the legislature decided to take up these same kinds of issues. And there was quite a bit of overlap between the 25 recommendations that I had made and what the legislature was doing. So I definitely participated with testifying at the legislature. They have committee hearings. I was sharing with you earlier today, it's so much better for Spokane during COVID because their remote testimony is allowed. So you don't have to fly to Olympia for the day to talk for 2 minutes at a committee hearing, and you can actually do multiple. I did 2 committee hearings today. So I testified, I'm just going to estimate about 10 different times. I spoke sometimes with the activist community. I think, you know, the activist community and my position, you know, they were to the left of me on some things. You know, I've been doing police reform for so long that, in my opinion, I kind of know, I think, what's possible and what works and not. And I think there's some people who are not really from the law enforcement community, whether or issue, who have unrealistic expectations of what it means to be a police officer and how to do that. You know, we all see it differently, I guess, is really a better thing to say it. And because I've represented police officers, because I've been in court numerous times about things, I just had a bit of a different sense of some of the advocates. And so sometimes we were crosswise, and then sometimes I was crosswise with police people. But it was interesting. There were 2 different statewide police organizations who were involved. And one organization was really pro most of the reforms, and one was not pro for most of the reforms. Most of my work was through the Association of Washington Cities. So that's a group that represents cities, and I've been in their legislative process for a long time. So I worked really closely with them and some police chiefs from on the west side of the state, and we kind of came up with the reforms that we thought were doable and pragmatic, that would improve things. And we really pushed on those. And the reason that the Association of Washington Cities got involved, interestingly, was they weren't as concerned about any one specific reform, but they wanted uniform procedures across the state. Because for smaller and medium-sized cities, it's so complex to come up with your own procedures and processes and standards. They're like, you know, we don't have the money to do that. Spokane does have the money to do it. In Seattle, and we mentioned Tacoma and Everett, maybe they do. But wouldn't it be better if it was uniform, that the police had the same standard in Seattle as they have in Spokane, and the same one they have in Deer Park? I mean, that's really what the Association of Washington Cities wanted. So that was really their thing. Regardless of kind of where you were on the continuum of an actual reform, they wanted it to be as uniform as possible. And that really carried the day. Their work on it really got us there. And so, you know, there are a lot of reforms. And I think one of law enforcement's response from the organization that wasn't as excited about the reforms was they had a lot of questions, like, can we help with people who are just having a mental health breakdown? Do we have to leave the scene if we don't see a crime? Can we use our 50 caliber beanbag guns? Because the law said you can't do 50 caliber ammunition, but that was really meant for 50 caliber bullets. So. I think there was about 7 things that were there afterwards that law enforcement said, hey, we're not clear and we don't want to risk it. So there's a bill now. I didn't testify on it, but it was, I think, yesterday morning, that cleans up those 7 questions and basically says, no, this is what. So that bill is going on. They call it a trailer bill, where they just kind of clean up some things that happened. There's a bill out there on when police can do what we call Terry stops that are just reasonable suspicion and not probable cause. If it's a crime of violence, so there's a bill on that. You know, so there's some things that will, I think, bridge the gap. But anyway, I was pretty involved, not as a statewide leader, but I was really involved within the Association of Washington Cities to get a uniform there and speak on it. So. Yeah, so I thought it turned out pretty well.
Really successful.
And now with these additions this year, I think then we'll really be closer. And, you know, when I listen to our police chief, his point is, yeah, a lot of these things are good, but change is hard. I got to retrain my staff. And the thing that he talks about, and I have a lot of empathy for it, is that sometimes when we're getting constructive feedback and a call to action to do something differently, it just feels like it's a criticism of us, of like we're doing a bad job, or we're a bad person, or we have bad intent. And I think most of the people who are involved in the reforms, that's not the thing. And I I make a point of saying this. I really reject the idea that there are bad apple police out there. That has not been my experience. That's a narrative of that the policies and the training is all good, but there's just some people that they're having their own mental health issue, or they just shouldn't be police, and we just got to get rid of those bad apples. That is not my experience. My experience is that almost every time something goes bad, in terms of someone being injured or killed that shouldn't have happened, it's a bad policy or bad training. That is my experience after more than 20 years of seeing lots of cases, and that's just the thing. And so I'm trying to work on preventative, which is change the policies, change the training, make them more effective, and then we'll have less death, less injury, less community dismay.
Would you propose any sort of new policies in addition to the ones that have already been passed?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing that I think we could do here that's not a statewide policy is coming up with an alternative to response to mental health crises. So right now, if you call 911 and say, oh my gosh, my roommate's having a breakdown, or there's some guy banging on my door who's clearly out of his mind, something, a behavioral issue, or he's high on drugs. Right now, really the only option that happens in Spokane is a armed police officer, well, multiple ones, come, and they're trained to protect people and identify threats of harm and death, and so they tend to see things through that lens. And so there's some very successful programs out there. One's in Eugene, you might have heard of it, called Cahoots. There's another one called the STAR program in Denver.
Yes.
Where the emergency communications dispatcher makes an assessment based on what the person's reporting. Does it need an armed police officer, or can it be a mental health person? Because if there's no weapons involved and there's no active violence, maybe a mental health trained person, social worker, is going to have a better response. And those have been super effective. We have a bit of a transition going right now in Spokane, which is, I don't know how many we have. I want to say 4 to 6 behavioral health officers that we pair with patrol officers, mostly in downtown, a little bit in the county. And so they go together to incidents like these.
Right.
Been very effective. I think their stats are they've been 75% successful in preventing someone from being taken to jail or a mental hospital, which is so much cheaper. It's quicker. It gets the police back on the street doing patrols. It works out better for the disturbed individual.
Right.
So, but this Cahoots and the STAR program go beyond it. They just don't even have an officer. It's just a behavioral health person. So that would be a change in our dispatch system and our system. So I think that's if I was going to say number one thing that would help, that would be it. And we'd have to devote the resources to it. But then, right now our police who feel like they can't respond to property crime because they're doing these kind of incidents, they would be freed up to show up at people's homes who've been burglarized and give them some assurances about things. So I think that's the number one thing. I've had an issue at the legislature. One of the issues was how you use canine, dogs.
Right.
The result of last year was they just decided to do a study about it, and so they haven't changed anything on that. I have some changes in mind on that, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But the interesting thing is, once we mentioned the potential of making some changes, our police department really changed their operations on police dogs to what pretty much I want, which is you don't automatically have the police dog bite people. So right now, our police dogs are trained to track people, which is what you want to do, especially if it's in the woods or in a building where there's places to hide. You don't want to risk an officer getting ambushed. So they are trained to track people, but they don't automatically bite people unless the officer tells them to bite people. And so my thing is, don't have the dogs bite people until there's a threat. And if someone's attacking the dog or attacking the officer or somebody else, that's an effective way to neutralize someone, and it's less dangerous than shooting them. So it's better than that. But for a while, they were just, my perception, and based on the stats, they were having these dogs bite people way more regularly. Now they bite people, I want to say, once a month, about maybe twice a month. So compared to how many times they apprehend people, they're not biting people. So that's a change. I wanted to put it in policy, like officially the law.
Right.
And the police department has essentially adopted it as an operations policy. So probably doesn't need to be the law. The state's going to come out with something, probably not this year, but next year.
Right. We're a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try
Yep.
to run through these last
Yep.
couple of questions really quick. What sense do you have about the culture within the Spokane Police Department as it relates to the law enforcement reform?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to know really accurately because I interact with police often, but I don't interact with all 300 of them very often. So I don't have a good sense of it.
Okay.
The people that I do interact with, and most of them tend to be more in leadership, not necessarily the chief, but in leadership. I think their sense is, I mentioned earlier that there's that feeling of taking it personally. So I think that is definitely, that's what I hear reported out. People feel like they're not appreciated for what they do and the danger that they do. So anytime you talk about reform that is suggested by the community, I think there's a certain group of people that feel they just take it personally, that it's a criticism.
Gotcha.
And I think police, in my dealings with them, in Spokane particularly, they want to propose the reforms. And if they propose it, then they feel better about it. So I think that there's a dynamic there. The way I'd like to address that, though, is that police work for the community. And so really the community should set the policy and set the values. And then police can certainly give them feedback and say, yeah, you say you have this value and you want to do this policy, but you also say you want safer streets, and we're seeing a conflict between the two, so here's the feedback with our subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that the police will tell the community how we're going to be policed is a wrong idea. It's, we're in a democracy. It's not a military situation. It's like, no, we decide, and there's pros and cons with doing that. So I think there's that one piece of like who's going to tell who what to do, and feeling personal. But I spent some time with some of our training officers, and they seemed really positive about it. And several people I've talked to in leadership feel positive about the reforms. If you strip out what was the intent or how do people feel about whether they're being criticized or not, and just go to the reforms, a lot of them they see are good reforms. They are good. And frankly, all the reforms that have been proposed, there are police officers somewhere who proposed them. So these weren't not involved with police. And as I mentioned, there was a whole police union in the state that supported just about all the reforms and says, yep, these are good. They'll keep officers safer. They'll keep community members safer. They'll bring people together. Certainly some resistance to it. And there's also, as the chief mentioned, it doesn't matter what policy is changing. There's resistance to it.
Yeah. I have a feeling I know what your answer is going to be in some sense, but do you feel that the streets of Spokane are now safer after these policies have gone into place?
Yes, and the data says they're safer. I mean, crime has continued to go down for the most part, though. The one thing that has not gone down has been, although I think it's less this year than last year, or 2021 was less than 2020, but is homicides. So that's the thing. Property crime is down. Most crime is down across the county, and particularly in the downtown and the city is down, just objectively over many years. For decades it's been going down, and then particularly in the last few years it's gone down in downtown Spokane. Homicides have been up nationally. And the thing about homicides is, again, I'm not a criminologist, but my understanding is most homicides are committed against people who are known, not strangers. So I think your average Spokane resident is afraid of a stranger criminal taking their stuff or hurting them or something like that. And that is definitely not up, that is down. But homicide is not always, but almost always, the people know each other and are in a dispute with each other, and it's horrible. And we have probably, I think most people think we have way too many guns around that people who shouldn't have them have access to, and so It happens a lot. So I would say homicides are the one thing we have to work on. But frankly, just last week, we had an article in the Spokesman that more people have been killed by car crashes and illegal driving than murders.
Yes. I saw
So that is the bigger problem. Yet our police department canceled its traffic unit. So, I mean, if you really want to use the data and you really want to protect people, you would have said, hey, we need to beef up the traffic unit. So that's why, I like to use the data and do that instead of whatever cultural narrative is out there. But yeah, so bottom line is, if you look at the data in the city of Spokane, across all crime things, crime is down, people are safer. That doesn't mean they feel safer, but objectively they are safer. And so what can we do for people who don't feel safe? I've had people tell me, I refuse to go downtown. It feels too dangerous. I have, 21-year-old daughters who are 5 foot tall each, twins, and they're fine going downtown. I'm fine going downtown and different. So, people have different comfort zones, but there are certainly a lot of people who don't feel comfortable and are afraid. And we have to keep working to change that. Otherwise, we're not doing our job.
Right. This isn't supposed to be a gotcha, but my last question for you is, when asked, do you support defund the police? What is your response? And what does reimagine public safety mean to you?
Yeah. So totally, I'm not a defund the police. As soon as I heard that quote, I go, oh, this is problematic for a couple of reasons. And even the people who say that, I tell them it's problematic for their goals. If you want less police brutality, better relationships, saying that is just not going to be helpful to your cause. It's not. So I've steadfastly said that. I've been on the council 6 years. Every year we've increased the police budget. I helped negotiate a significant police raise. The contract was stuck. The mayor, to her credit, invited me in to direct negotiations with the police. We got a contract that gave them serious raises after 4 years of no raises and no contract. So I believe in adequately funding public safety. Reimagine, when I use that term, and I've got a new term from talking to the chief, which I'll get to finish. But reimagine is, okay, if the goal is to have less crime and people better behaved in society, then what do we need to do differently instead of doing things the same way? So what could we do differently in terms of how police operate, and not just patrol, because that's one thing, but what do we do with people who are arrested? How do we get them off substances or get their behavioral health issues? We know that when we just send people to prison without anything else, and they get out within 3 years, 67% or more are charged and going back. So that's a horrible business success rate. So that means we need to be doing something different. And I've been working on criminal justice reform at large for more than 20 years. And there's so many things that are proven that work, that law enforcement likes to, takes funding, takes changing things. So reimagining is just looking at the data and saying what works. These behavioral health officers that we're doing is just a great example. So we need more of them. So that's what I mean. But I was talking to the chief of police, and he told me, he goes, I really don't like that term, reimagine public safety, Brian. And I'm like, well, why not? He goes, well, it kind of implies that we're doing something wrong right now. He goes, I said, well, give me your term. He goes, let's have an evolving public safety. And I'm like, yeah, great. I'm with you. I will start using that term. So that is my new term, evolving public safety. And it basically says, yeah, we've learned from the past, and it doesn't mean that our intentions were bad, but we are going to be better going forward. And I think we can all get behind that.
It's always good to always be trying to get better, and that's all we can ask for. But I want to thank you for sitting down and talking with me today. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so taking the time to come down here to the Holly Mason building and talking to us is great. And for those of you watching at home, thank you for tuning into The Pulse. We appreciate your time. I'm your host, Connor Sundet.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all from us. Tune in each Friday for more of The Pulse. We hope to see you soon, and until then, feel free to binge all of our content on YouTube or Facebook. Stay safe, and goodbye for now.